to my channel and welcome to another monthly wrap-up video. I can't believe we're already on to our April monthly wrap-up, and this month's reading I genuinely think is probably one of the best reading months that I've had this year. I genuinely think so. I think I've read the most books that I've read so far in a month, and I've also had some really anticipated reads that I got round to. And as for the April TBR, out of the 7 books that I had on my April TBR, I actually managed to read 6 of them, which I think is the most successful TBR that we've had so far, I want to say. So I actually read 9 books this month altogether. One of those was a novella, so 8 books and a novella. 9 books in total. So let's talk about them. The first book that I read in April was Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. I just love an Abby Jimenez world. I love her books. I love the way she writes. I just love it. This one we have Xavier, who is a vet, and he meets Samantha, who is like a social media marketing thing for a mustard company. And we essentially have these 2 people that have this really amazing date that they go on, and they don't want to leave the date, and they just feel this really deep connection with each other. But Samantha is actually moving away the next day after this date. So then we have this long distance situation, and we follow these 2 characters trying to make it work long distance. And the thing that I absolutely loved about this is that these 2 characters were not going to give up on each other. Like, not being together wasn't even an option for these 2. There was a real element of soulmates kind of in this, because they just truly believed that they were destined for each other, and that's why they didn't want to give up, and they just did anything to make it work. I also say this all the time about Abby Jimenez's books, but I love how she puts up the characters in very real scenarios and situations, and her romances just feel very genuine and authentic. And this was literally no different in that aspect, because the problems that they were facing are very real problems, and they were also the kind of problems that when I'm reading it, I was like, I genuinely don't know how you're going to solve this. Like, I don't know what the solution is. There's no clear solution. And I think that's partly what makes her books work so well with the couples, and why you really want to root for them to be together, because it all makes sense. This is also one that I literally read in like 2 days. I genuinely sped through it. There was just something very addictive about it. I do find that a lot with Abby Jimenez's writing and her books in general, that you can literally just binge read them because you just get so invested in these characters and you want them to be together so badly, and she really just keeps you kind of on the edge of your seat, not really knowing how it's going to sort itself out. I also really enjoyed the kind of memory aspect of it, and how the theme of memories and remembering people and the importance of having memories with people and making memories. I really liked how that theme kept coming up, and also the theme of like seeing your life in colour versus in grey or black and white, and cherishing the people that make you feel like you're living in colour. I just loved how that was kind of brought up throughout. That's another thing about her books. I feel like there's always some sort of like life message that you can take from it. Again, this one does have harder topics kind of dealt with, but the way that they're dealt with and they're spoken about is just done so beautifully. And she just has the balance of real life harder situations being spoken about, but then also at the same time it's still being really fun and still feeling like a rom-com. I just genuinely could not recommend her books enough. I'm so excited to read her other series, the first series that she did, which is the Happy Ever After playlist series. I'm so excited to start reading that one. And for rating, I rated this 4.5 stars. 4.5 stars! So a very strong start to the month. And then I moved on to The Situationship, which is actually an Abby Jimenez novella, and this one I've actually been wanting to read for a while, and it was actually in the back of my copy of Say You'll Remember Me, so I just read that straight after I finished it. And this one focuses on side characters in Just the Summer and Part of Your World, and it's just a really short story. I think it was like 30 or 40 pages. It is one that I was really wanting to read. It's a cute little story. I don't really have a rating for this one because I feel like it's hard to rate something that's literally 30 pages. But it's one of those where I will literally read anything she writes at this point, honestly. Then I moved on to Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is a sci-fi thriller, and I found this one really interesting. This was another quite bingeable read because it's different to any other thriller that I've read, and the whole concept of this one just fascinated me. It's basically a thriller centered around multiverses. So we have our main character Jason, and he kind of finds himself going into multiple different universes in order to find his way back home to his family. And that whole concept in itself is so interesting to me. I liked how we got to see him travelling to these different multiverses, and you also have the anticipation of whether he's ever going to make it back home and ever going to find his actual real family for that Jason, for that version of him. This is probably not going to make any sense unless you've read this book. And I think it's really interesting how he took the idea of making different choices and the kind of path not taken. I thought that was a really interesting idea that kept coming up throughout this book. Straight after I read this, I watched the series as well, and I really enjoyed the series. The series was slightly different to the book, especially with some of the side characters, but I do feel like the show, they were able to kind of build out a bit more and give the side characters kind of more of a story, more of a backstory than we actually got in this one. Just because this is all first person and we spend the whole time with Jason pretty much. And I rated this one 4 stars. Then I read Heartstopper Volume 5, and this one was cute. I feel like I don't really have that much to say about each individual Heartstopper at this point. I just really like the series. I really like it. I feel like I rate them all like 4 stars because this series as a whole is very 4-star vibes. This one followed Nick and Charlie going to university visits, and I found that really fun because as somebody that is in the UK, some of the unis I'm familiar with, and I was like, oh my god, no way. Like the graphics and everything were literally the uni. I know that sounds so silly, but I just really enjoyed that. And like I always say, I just love Nick and Charlie. I love them, they're so cute. And I was actually pleasantly surprised to find out that there is actually a volume 6, which I was unaware of. But when I finished this one, I was like, that doesn't feel like an ending. It doesn't feel like an ending. But a volume 6 has actually been confirmed. I don't know if that's the last one. I feel like it might be. But I'm excited to read that one whenever it comes out. And like I said, I rated this one 4 stars, just very cute, easy read. And I'm really happy that I'm up to date with Nick and Charlie and everything. And also, this is another one that I started watching the series after I finished this. I mean, I could have started watching the series literally after I finished like the first book, or the first 2, I want to say. I think I'm currently on season 2, but I have been really enjoying that. I think it's so crazy to see it come to life. Okay, and then I moved on to Fearless by Lauren Roberts, which, as we know, was probably my most anticipated read this entire year. For anybody that doesn't know, this is the 3rd and final one in the Powerless trilogy. So a very, very anticipated release. And I do have a full vlog literally just dedicated to reading this, which I will leave linked down below because you can see my thoughts throughout reading it and everything. I feel like I have so much to say about this book and I genuinely don't know where to start. I'm not going to go into massive detail about it, just I obviously don't want to give any spoilers away, and this is the last one in the series. And also, like I said, there are like my full in-depth thoughts and questions and everything in that vlog. But to give it kind of a summary, first 100 or so pages I did find were quite, I don't want to say slow, it just felt like kind of setting up for the book and a lot of recapping of what had happened in Powerless and Reckless, which there is no problem with that. But I did find that at about page 50 or 60 I was kind of like, okay, like I'm ready to get into the actual plot of this one. But once I was past that 100-page mark, I was really invested in the actual story of this one. This one was just crazy. It was crazy. I just feel like there's a lot to unpack about this. By the end of it, I did still have so many questions, but not in a bad way, just in a, I need more information. Lauren, I'm gonna need more. And I'm really intrigued to read the novella and to find out who that's about and hopefully get some more answers. So I'm very intrigued because Lauren herself did say that we were meant to have questions by the end of this, and I definitely have questions, for definite. So I'm intrigued to see what happens next, what she next brings out to answer some of our questions. But I did really enjoy this as a final book and a kind of wrap up of the series, but I wouldn't even say it was a wrap up of the series. But it kind of is, of like Peyton and Kai. I really liked all the twists that came at the end, even though some of them I had kind of considered before. But I still really enjoyed how it was all kind of uncovered and everything. And yeah, I rated this 4 stars. 4 stars. Then I moved on to What If I Never Get Over You by Paige Toon. First of all, can we just appreciate the sprayed edges on this one? I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed. And in this one we follow Ellie, and she's integrating and she meets a guy called Ash, and they basically have this whirlwind of like 3 or 4 days together. They form this deep connection with each other, and then they both have to go their separate ways, but they agree to meet in a week's time in Madrid. So the week comes around, Ellie goes there to Madrid and Ash never shows up. And then it follows her years later and she gets her dream job, and while she's working her dream job, Ash kind of reappears in her life. after all this time, and she's literally gone years without hearing anything from him. And the thing is about this one, I love the whole idea of it, and even after finishing the book, I love all the plot points on where Page Toon kind of took the story. I just didn't love how it was kind of done. I think that was what kind of brought my rating down with this one. I love the whole concept of it, and I love the storyline, but just not the way that it was actually executed. And I think part of that is because I didn't love Ellie as a character. I found her quite annoying and quite frustrating at times. And it was one of those where I was like, if you just talk to people, like if you actually just spoke to people instead of just running away all the time, like maybe we would get somewhere. Maybe we would. I think that kind of took me out of the story a bit and made me not root for them as much. But this is definitely a romance that will keep you turning the page. Like, I was very invested in the story altogether. I just kind of had to force myself to overlook the FMC at times. But like I said, the actual storyline really kept me reading and really kept me hooked. And Page Toon's writing in general is just very bingeable, very readable. And I'm definitely looking forward to reading more of her books as well, because I've literally only read this one and Seven Summers. And in both of them, her writing has just been very easy to read. And it's like kind of writing where you just forget that you're reading because you're so lost in this world with these characters. And I ended up rating this 3 stars. Then I read Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This is a psychological thriller. It's centered around a campus killer. So we have Charlie, who is at university, and she really wants to get home because of this campus killer kind of on the loose. So she gets a ride share with a stranger who offers her a ride because he's going in the same direction as her. So we basically spend this whole book in the car with these 2 strangers, and she begins to suspect that the driver is actually the campus killer. Now that plot in itself, I was so invested in already, like literally just from the blurb, but this one really fell flat for me. I actually ended up listening to this on audiobook for majority of this book, and I will say that the audiobook was very easy to listen to while I was doing other things, but I just didn't love it. I didn't love it. The first thing that I was kind of struggling with is the amount of movie references in this book was insane. And I found it kind of jarring to read because there were just so many. So many. The second thing that I found kind of hard to overlook is the fact that our main character literally got in a car with a stranger knowing that there was a campus killer on the loose. Like, that was kind of a plot point that I couldn't even fathom. Like, I was just kind of like, that's so unrealistic to me, and it kind of makes it hard to then become invested in this story. But I did want to keep reading, and I wanted to give it a chance because I thought maybe there was a reason for that, and maybe not everything was as it seemed. Having finished the book, I can honestly say that there was no reason for that. And I should have kind of trusted my gut instinct on that one and DNF'd it when I wanted to, because I genuinely wanted to DNF it at like 80 pages in, I want to say. And I probably should have done. I think I was really hoping for some crazy plot twist of some sort. It was a very predictable twist to the point where I literally thought it early on, and I thought that's too obvious. Like, it can't be that because that's too obvious. So maybe it's unpredictably predictable. I don't know. But I do kind of wish that I had DNF'd this, but I didn't. I finished it and I rated it 2 stars. Then I picked up The Conditions of Will by Jessa Hastings. I love Jessa Hastings' writing. I love it. This one I really enjoyed. It's very much giving toxic family drama. The family drama. So we have Georgia, and Georgia's basically been exiled from her family. Her family is a very wealthy, conservative, religious family, and her and one of her brothers were basically exiled from the family and sent away for literally years until their father passes away. So they're kind of brought back together with the family to go to the funeral and the reading of the will and everything. So we have this really interesting dynamic where these 2 siblings that have literally been away for years and years come back into this family that basically exiled them, and how they're kind of interacting with each other and what that dynamic is like now that these 2 siblings have basically grown up. Because I think when they left they were like 15, so very young, and they've come back as like 20-something-year-olds. And her brother basically brings his AA sponsor with him, and Georgia takes a bit of an interest in this AA sponsor. So it's a family drama with a romance in there as well, and I really liked how the romance was done because it very much felt kind of intertwined with everything else that was going on. But even though this is a romance, it doesn't feel like a romance, if that makes sense. It feels very kind of real life, and it does have a very similar feeling to Magnolia Parks. For anybody that doesn't know, Magnolia Parks is one of Jessa Hastings' book series. It's one of my all-time favourite series, and Georgia, our main character in here, is actually mentioned in the Magnolia Parks universe. Very, very briefly, but she does kind of fit into that world. So it does definitely have a similar vibe to Magnolia Parks, but where Magnolia Parks feels very romance centered, this one felt like a good mix of real life family drama that she was dealing with, but then also this romance that happened to come at the same time. I really enjoyed how Sam Penny had George's back the whole time. Like, you just really got that feeling of he was always going to stand by her side no matter what, and he had her back through and through. I also loved the behavioural analysis aspect. Georgia basically studies psychology with behavioural analysis, and I just found that whole thing fascinating, and the way she used that in here to read people and to understand people was really, really interesting. And it really reminded me of Magnolia Parks, where we have Magnolia who can literally name where every single piece of clothing that somebody is wearing is from, and it felt very similar the way she'd used the behavioural analysis, just with how she could name like specific muscles that were moving in the face to make different expressions. So I really, really liked that aspect of it as well. And as you can see, I've literally tabbed it because there is something about Jess Hastings' writing that gets me every time, and I literally can't not annotate it. Just the way she describes certain moments or certain feelings, I'm like, I have to tab it, I have to. And for rating, I gave this 4.5 stars. And then the last book that I read in April, I actually finished reading this just at the start of May. We have Nothing Like the Movies by Lynn Painter, and you might be confused as to how this was in my May TBR choosing video, because this was actually one of the options. It originally was on my April TBR, but then I didn't think I would have time to get round to it. So when I filmed my Instagram followers choose my May TBR, I put it as an option to be chosen with something else, and this didn't actually end up getting chosen for that. And then I finished The Conditions of Will earlier than I thought, so I realised that I did actually have some time to fit this in. I did finish reading it a little bit into the start of May, but I'm counting it as an April read. First things first, Wes Bennett. Wes Bennett in this book, obsessed. Obsessed. I feel like I wasn't that fussed about him in Better Than the Movies. Like, I really liked Liz and Wes and I liked their story, but I wasn't really fussed about him as a book boyfriend per se. This one, I was like, who is this man? Who is he? He was so down bad for Liz. He was so down bad, and yet he still kept coming out with these teasing, flirty lines, and I'm like, okay. Okay. This is the sequel to Better Than the Movies. Better Than the Movies basically focuses on Liz and Wes when they're teenagers. And this one is set a few years later. They're in their 20s, they're at university. I really enjoyed that part of it and how they felt a bit older. I also found it really interesting how this one felt more centred around Wes, whereas the other one felt more centred around Liz. And I know we have both points of views, but there's something about it where the first one is like Liz's book and then this one is Wes's book. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody else, but it did just feel more centred around Wes. I also found it really interesting how Lynn Painter had basically separated them from the first book, so they weren't together at the start of this book, so we got to learn what had happened in between. And it also meant this one was then a slow burn, second chance romance situation, which I was so here for. I just had a lot of fun reading this one, and I was literally giggling at some points. I was literally giggling. It was just a good vibe. Overall, it was just a good vibe, and I rated it 4 stars. Also, I absolutely love the references to like Taylor Swift and Gracie Abrams. That is so up my street. Love. We love. And they're all the books that I read in April. Time for book of the month. If you're new here, at the end of every monthly wrap-up video, I basically give a shout out to my favourite book of that month. And at the end of the year, I think it's so fun to look back on what my favourite book from each month was. So book of the month for this month, I genuinely cannot choose between two. I'm honestly so stuck between Say You'll Remember Me and The Conditions of Will. I'm so stuck between these two. I really don't know. I really don't know. This is the first month where we're actually going to have two. These are so equal in my head though. I genuinely think I can't choose between these two. So we're going to have 2 books in the month. This seems so silly. This seems so silly. We're gonna go for Say You'll Remember Me and also The Conditions of Will. I just love these two equally, but for different reasons. So we're gonna have to have 2 this month. I'm so sorry if you wanted me to just pick one, but I genuinely can't out of these two. And also considering I literally read so many anticipated releases this month, I feel like that's not bad to have 2. Me literally trying to justify it. It's fine, it's fine. We're having 2. We're having 2 because they deserve it. They both deserve the book of the month space. And that actually brings us to the end of this video. If you are still here watching this video, please leave a little star emoji in the comments so that I know. And I really, really hope that you've enjoyed watching. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will hopefully see you in my next video.